today, we're going to be reading Thank You, Mr. Falker by Patricia Polacco. And the reason why I'm wearing my shirt that says Make America Inclusive is because it is Veterans Day. And Veterans Day is celebrating about all the people, all the soldiers who have served in the military, that they can be alive or dead, but that are not serving now, that could be serving now, are retired, but they don't have to be necessarily retired. But all the soldiers that are alive or dead, we celebrate everyone who served. And then Memorial Day is when we just celebrate the soldiers who passed away serving in the military, not the alive. But in Veterans Day, we celebrate everyone. So if you're celebrating Veterans Day today, say a prayer for all the veterans and tell them thank you if you see a veteran today. Thank you for their service. So we are going to get into today's story. Thank you, Mr. Falker. We're going to be getting in today's story. Yep, so, okay. Today's story is by Patricia Polacco. The grandpa held the jar of honey so that the family could see. Then dipped a handle into the drizzled honey on the cover of the small book. The little girl had just turned 5. Stand up, little one, he called. I did this for your mother, your uncles, your older brother, and now you. Then he handed a book to her. Taste. She dipped her finger into the honey and put it in her mouth. Well, what does that taste? The grandma asked. The little girl answered, sweet. Then all of the family said a single voice, yes, so is knowledge. But knowledge is like a bee that makes sweet honey. You have to chase it through the pages of the book. The little girl knew that the promise to read was at last hers. So she was going to learn to read. So this little girl is going to learn to read. It's going to learn to read. Trisha, the littlest girl in her family, grew up loving books. Her school teacher, mother, read to her every night. Her red-headed brother brought his books home from school and shared them. And whenever she visited her family farm, her grandfather and grandmother read to her by the stone fireplace. When she turned 5, she went to kindergarten. Most of all, she hoped to read. Each day she saw kids in first grade across the hall reading. And before the year was over, some of her kids in her own class began to read. Not Trisha. Still, she loved being at school because she could draw. The other kids would crowd around her and watch her do her magic with crayons. I'm in first grade. You'll learn to read, her brother said. Yeah, so in first grade, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade, those are all the grades when you learn to read. And that you learn how to sound out words. You learn all that stuff in kindergarten, first grade. In first grade. So it's good for you to learn how to read, friends. I know how to read because I'm reading this book to you. If I didn't know how to read, I wouldn't be reading any of these read alouds to you. But I learned to read in school, so that's why I'm reading this book to you. And that's why I read, is because I learned how to read in school. In first grade, Trisha sat in the circle with the other kids. They were all holding Our Neighborhood. Their first reader, sounded out letters in words. He said oi, and they said look. The teacher smiled at them when they put all the sounds together and got a word right. But when Trisha looked at the page, all she saw were wiggly shapes. And when she tried to sound out words, the other kids laughed at her. Trisha, what are you looking at in that book? They'd say. I'm reading, she said back to them. But their teacher would always move on to the next person, always when it was her turn to read. The teacher had to help her with every single word. And while the other kids moved up to the second reader and the third reader, she'd stay alone on Our Neighborhood. Trisha began to feel different. She began to feel dumb. You should never feel dumb because you can't read. You are unique and special in your own way. Don't feel dumb. The harder words got for the little girl, the more and more time she spent drawing. How she loved to draw, or just sitting and dreaming. Or when she could go for walks with her grandmother. One summer day, she and her grandma were walking together in the small woods behind their farm. It was twilight. The air was sweet and warm. Fireflies were coming up from the grasses. As they walked, Trisha said, "Grammy, do you think I'm different?" "Of course," her grandma answered. "To be different is a miracle of life. You see all those little fireflies? Everyone is different." "Do you think I'm smart?" Trisha didn't feel smart. Her grandmother hugged her. "You're the smartest, quickest, dearest little thing ever." Right then, the little girl felt safe in her grandma's arms. Reading doesn't matter much. Trisha's grandma used to say that the stars were holes in the sky. They were the light of heaven coming from the other side. And she used to say that someday she would be on the other side, where the lights come from. One evening, they lay on the grass together and counted the lights from heaven. "You know," said her grandmother said, all of those will go there someday. All of us will go there someday. Hang on the grass and you'll lift right off the ground, and there you'll be." She laughed, and both hang on the grass. But it was not long after that her grandma must have let go of the grass. She went to where the lights were on the other side. Not long after that, Trisha's grandpa had let go of the grass too. School seemed harder and harder now. What happened? Her grandparents died. that her grandparents passed away is a more respectful way to say it. But they passed away. Reading was just plain torture. When Sue, I don't know how to say this, but it's okay, I'm just going to say Sue, read the page. When Tommy Bob read his page, they read so easily that Trisha would watch the top of their heads to see if something was happening in their heads that wasn't happening in hers. And numbers were the hardest thing of all to read. She never added anything right. Line up the numbers before you add, the teacher would say. But when Trisha tried, the numbers looked like a stack of blocks, wobbly and ready to fall. She just knew she was dumb. Then one day her mother announced that she had gotten a teaching job in California. Along the way from the family farm in Michigan. Even though her grandma and grandpa were gone, the little girl didn't want to move. Maybe though the teachers and kids in her new school wouldn't know how dumb she was. She and her mother and brother moved across the country in two-tone 1949. I don't know to say this word, but it's okay. It took 5 days. They're gonna move. But at the new school was the same. When she tried to read, she stumbled over words, act, and she was reading like a baby in 3rd grade. And when her teacher read along with them, she called on Trisha for the answer, she gave the wrong answer every time. Hey, dummy, a boy called out to her on the playground. How come you're so dumb? Other kids stood near him and they laughed. Trisha felt the tears burning in her eyes. How she longed to go back to her grandparents' farm in Michigan. Look how sad she is. Oh my God, that's so sad. Oh my God, I would never bully her. Now Trisha wanted to go to school less and less. I have a sore throat, she said to her mother, or I have a stomach ache. She dreamed more and more, and she drew more and more, and she hated school. Then when Trisha started 5th grade, the school was all buzz. There was a new teacher. He was tall and elegant. Everybody loved his striped coat and slick gray pants. He wore the neatest clothes. All the unusual teacher's pets gathered around him. Stevie Joe and Alice Mary, David and Michael Lee. But right from the start, it didn't seem to matter to Mr. Falker which kids were the cutest or smartest or the best at anything. Mr. Falker would stand behind Trisha whenever she was drawing and whisper, "That is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Do you know how talented you are?" When he said this, even the kids who teased her would turn around their seats and look at her drawings. But she still laughed whenever she gave a wrong answer. Then one day she had to stand up and read, which she hated. She was stumbling through a page in Charlotte's Web. And the page was going all fuzzy when the kids began to laugh out loud. Mr. Falker, in his plaid jacket and butterfly tie, said, "Stop! Are all of you perfect that you could look at another person and find fault with her?" That was the last day anyone laughed out loud or made fun of her, all except Eric. He sat behind Trisha for 2 whole years, but he seemed almost to hate her. Trisha didn't know why. He waited by the door of the classroom and pulled her hair. He waited for her on the playground, leaned her face and called her Toad. Trisha was afraid to turn any corner for fear Eric would be there. She felt completely alone. The only time she felt really happy was when she was around Mr. Falker. He let her erase the blackboards. Only the best students got to do that. He patted her on the back whenever she got something right, and he looked hard and mean at any kid who teased her. Mr. Falker's being really kind to Trisha right now, and that's exactly how any teacher should treat someone who doesn't know how to read. But the nicer Mr. Falker was to Trisha, the worse Eric treated her. He got all the other kids to wait for her on the playground or in the cafeteria or even in the bathroom and to jump out and called her stupid or ugly. And Trisha began to believe them. She discovered that if she asked to go to the bathroom just before recess, she could hide under the inside stairwell during the free time and not have to go outside at all. In that dark place, she felt completely safe. She should not be that afraid to not even go outside. Well, there's a bully right now, so I understand it, but she could tell the teacher or something, or talk to the guidance counselor instead of hiding. But one day at recess, Eric followed her to her secret hiding place. Having became a mole, he laughed and pulled her out into the hall and danced around her. Dumbbell, dumbbell, dumbbell. Trisha buried her head in her arms and curled up in a ball. Suddenly, she heard footsteps. It was Mr. Falker. He marched Eric down to the office. When he came back, he found Trisha. "I don't think you have to worry about that boy again," he said softly. "What was he teasing you about, little one?" "I don't know," Trisha shrugged. Trisha was sure Mr. Falker believed that she could read. She had learned to memorize what the kid next to her was reading, or she would wait for Mr. Falker to help her with the sentence, and then she'd say the same thing he did. "Good," he would say. One day, Mr. Falker asked her to stay after school and help wash the blackboards. He put on music and brought out a little sandwiches he had worked and talked. All at once, let's play a game. I'll sound out letters. You write them on the board with a wet sponge as quickly as you can. "A," he shouted. She wiped a watery A. "8," he shouted. She made a watery A. 14, 3, D, M, Q, he shouted out. He shouted out many, many letters and numbers. Then he walked up behind her, and together they looked at the board. It was a watery mess. Trisha knew none of those letters or numbers looked like they should. She threw a sponge down and tried to run. I think she might be embarrassed that she can't read. But Mr. Falker caught her arm and sank to his knees in front of her. "You poor baby," he said. "You think you're dumb, don't you? How awful for you to be so lonely and afraid." She sobbed. "But little one, don't you understand? You see letters and numbers. You don't see letters and numbers the way other people do. And you've gone through school all this time and fooled many, many good teachers." He smiled at her. "That took cunning and smartness and such bravery." Then he stood up and finished watching the board. "We're gonna change all of that, girl. You're gonna read. I promise you that." Now, almost every day after school, she met with Mr. Falker and Miss Plessy, a reading teacher. He did a lot of things she didn't even understand. At first, she made circles in sand, and then big sponge circles on the blackboard, going left to right, left to right. Another day, she flipped letters on the screen, and Trisha shouted them out loud. Still other days, she worked with wooden blocks and built words. Letters, 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 words, 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 always sounding them out, and that felt good. But though she read words, she hadn't read a whole sentence, and deep down she still felt dumb. And then one spring day, had it been 3 months or 4 months since they started, Mr. Falker put a book in front of her. She had never seen it before. He picked a paragraph in the middle of a page and pointed at it, almost if it were magic, or if a light poured into her brain. The words and sentences started to take shape on the page as they never had before. She marched them off too slowly. She read a sentence, then another, and finally she read a paragraph. And she understood the whole thing. She didn't notice that Mr. Falker and Miss Plessy had tears in their eyes. Okay. I spot my nose in the book. That night, Trisha ran home without stopping to catch her breath. Let's see, did I show you? I did. I'm just going to show you it again. That night, Trisha ran home without stopping to catch her breath. She bonded up with the front steps, threw open the front door, and she ran through the dining room to the kitchen. She climbed up the cupboard and grabbed a jar of honey. Then she went to the living room and found a book on the shelf, the very book that her grandpa had showed her so many years ago. She spooned honey on the cover and tasted the sweetness. And she said to herself, "The honey is sweet, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like a bee who made the honey. It has been chased through this pages of the book. Then she held the book, honey of all, closed her chest. She could feel tears roll down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of sadness. She was happy, so very happy. The rest of the year, she became in discovery, an adventure for the little girl. She learned to love school. I know because that little girl was me, Patricia Polacco. I saw Mr. Falker again in 30 years later at a wedding. I walked up to him and introduced myself. At first, he had difficulty placing me, but then I told him how I was and how he changed my life many years ago. I hugged and asked what I did for a living. Why, Mr. Falker, I answered. I made books for children. Thank you, Mr. Falker, thank you. So that is a message that the author wrote. And that is a message. Thank you, Mr. Falker. This is actually my library book. And that was so good because the lesson in the story is when life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. It is so pleasant, and this book, that is what the author wrote, guys. It is so fabulous, that story. It was long, I would say, but adios, guys. Thank you for listening. Bye.